Welcome to the Clima podcast. In today's episode, I speak with Natasha Cockerell. Natasha is a registered architect and director of Respond Architects, as well as a board member of the Passive House Institute of New Zealand. Her experience includes work on retail and commercial, as well as multi-storey office developments while on her OE in the UK. Since returning to New Zealand, she's been working on large commercial and educational projects, but also enjoys working with individual homeowners to help them design their dream home. Clima inspires and educates people to create healthy, durable and energy-efficient buildings to live, learn, work and play in. Hi Natasha, how's your day going?
Good, thank you, Simon.
Awesome. Great to have you here today. Now, Natasha, what inspired you to become an architect?
Well, I can't really remember a time when I didn't want to be an architect, to be honest. I think I was probably about 11 or 12 and my dad and my granddad were building our new family home and we lived on site in a fitted out shed, basically, for 2 years while that was getting built. And I just found that fascinating, that the building going up in front of me, the spaces coming to life, the technical details. A lot of my family are builders or tradespeople, and I think this was in the early 90s, late 80s, so there was not really a thing as such as STEM, but basically if you wanted to do something that was creative and about art and was also about science, which my two passions, then architecture was the obvious choice. So I think I was at intermediate school, which is a bit scary because that's the age my daughter's at now. So I went through all of high school knowing that was what I was going to do.
Wow, that must be really cool to actually have that confidence that you can sort of really start aiming and preparing yourself for that.
I think it's a real gift, actually, because I see young people, that I know now, coming into year 13 or first year of uni, not really knowing what they want to do, and doing a BA for the sake of it, or just not having that direction. And so actually knowing exactly what you want to do and what you need to do to achieve it, I was really lucky.
And that must have really given you a good background, having sort of the hands-on of watching the whole building process going on in front of your eyes.
Yeah, although it's funny, I was the first person in my extended family to go to university, and so with all of my relatives, uncles and cousins and grandfather being in the trades, their perception of architects wasn't that great. Probably just people that caused problems for them more than anything. So there was that to overcome. But yeah, it was great to see the technical side of things. I think it was 1991 that house was getting built, and I helped my dad install a solar panel system on the roof for hot water heating. Probably would have been one of the earlier systems in New Zealand with the big roof-mounted tanks, but that really piqued my interest quite early in the whole energy efficiency thing as well.
Was that sort of white one with sort of a black dome on top of it?
No, it's like a big silver tank. I think it was Solar Heart or something.
Yes.
And you had the panels, so it just did water heating, not energy generation. But obviously that would have been one of the earlier models in New Zealand.
Yes, because I remember growing up in our family home, we also had, but it was like a white sort of a round thing, and it had this big black dome on the top with sort of a perspex sort of cover. And literally the water just went through there and heated up and then assisted with the energy efficiency of the whole heating process.
Yeah, pretty amazing when you think to where the technology's got to today and what we have available to us.
Yeah, totally. And which part of New Zealand did you grow up in?
Not far from here, actually, Papakura in South Auckland.
Wow. Okay. Yep. So the house that you then moved into and grew up in, do you remember how was that comfortable in the winter and in the summer? Can you remember back?
Well, I think in my teenage view it was, but bear in mind that we just lived in a shed for 2 years.
Yeah, so
that had no insulation and had field mice that would run across the carpet when we were watching TV. So to move into a code standard house there where I had my own bedroom and didn't have to share with my brothers, and it had insulation and no mice, compared to what I had been living in, it seemed pretty good. If I looked back now, I'm sure it probably wasn't, but it's all relative, isn't it?
Oh, exactly, it is. And it's just interesting to see, different parts of the world, how different the construction is. I mean, when I grew up in South Africa, we were building houses with double bricklayer. There was no timber except for trusses in the roof. So quite a different coming to New Zealand and seeing timber construction and things like that. So yeah, all over the world there's quite a difference in the way that houses are built, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I found the same in reverse when I went to the UK to work for a couple of years, and the construction methods over there were completely different. And then I came back here and I had to get used to thermal bridges again,
yes.
and not putting insulation everywhere you could fit it.
Exactly. And over in the UK, they've got pretty much central heating in most of the houses as well, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, radiators in every room.
So that's a big difference compared to in New Zealand, where we really only heat the space that we're in at that time, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And when you're at that kind of younger 20s age that I was when I came back as well, and you're flatting in Mount Eden, probably in some of the worst housing stock in Auckland in terms of thermal comfort. But I think it's just we accept a lot just because we don't know any different.
So just going back in time a little bit, obviously you knew about what you wanted to do, left school and then went to university, was it, to study architecture?
Yes, yeah, Auckland, University of Auckland for 5 years, yep.
And then how did you find getting out and getting your first job after that?
Yeah, well, when I came out of university and at the end of 2003, start of 2004, there weren't a huge amount of jobs around. I was lucky to get a job at Woodhams Beckles Architects,
yes.
and worked on shopping centres for a couple of years.
Ah, okay.
So got, straight into Westfield shopping centre design, which was a baptism of fire and pretty interesting. And then I went on the OE to the UK, which we all do, and worked for a couple of years there at a firm called Orchid Fitzroy Robinson. The claim to fame of that firm was was Fitzroy Robinson was the firm that the guys from Pink Floyd worked at when they were architectural graduates before they decided that rock music would be a better option. So there was an old guy there who worked there that had worked with them. So that was the kind of cool London vibe that you got.
Wow, that must have been really cool. I didn't realise that Pink Floyd were into architecture.
Yeah, they were all architectural graduates.
Wow.
And then obviously all got sort of internal or graduate roles, and then decided there were better options out there.
Oh wow! And then what prompted the move back to New Zealand?
It was just the end of my sort of OE, temporary visa, and I was ready to come back. I mean, it's great experience and travel over there, but New Zealand's unique. I love it, and family and friends. So, yeah. So I designed office buildings over there, coming from shopping centres to office buildings, and then back to New Zealand, a little bit more shopping centre stuff, working for Westfield. And that was coming into 2009, which was the GFC was hitting, basically. And there wasn't a lot of work around, and I got offered the role at Prendos, which I knew nothing about leaky buildings or weather tightness remediation or anything, but a job's a job.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm still here, still here 15 years later. So
it must have worked out well.
It's just one of those pathways that your life takes you on,
So Natasha, you've been doing quite a lot of work at the Ministry of Education, haven't you?
Yeah. I've been doing work for the ministry as an architect, so as part of our work at Respond Architects since 2009, and that's been literally hundreds of projects, a lot of remediation, new build, ILE fit outs, which is kind of internal retrofits. And that led in 2018 to me being appointed to their weather tightness remediation panel, and then that in turn led to being invited to assist with writing their weather tightness design requirements. So the last few years I've done quite a lot of that sort of consultancy and advisory type role. Been really interesting.
So what were some of the challenges that the schools have been facing with construction?
Well, we all hear about weather tightness remediation and leaky schools. That's been in the news a lot over the last 15 years. But schools are a bit different than other types of buildings in that the issues that we get in terms of weather tightness, a lot of it's to do with roofs, not walls, and just really complex designs. A lot of it's not necessarily to do with there being a problem with the product, but to the fact that something that needs a lot of maintenance has been specified and the school doesn't have money to do that maintenance, and so it's deteriorating before its time. There's deferred maintenance, and so the failures are because of that. And then sort of the third thing is that a lot of what's called mistakenly called a leaky building is actually a building with an internal moisture problem. So the ministry has a lot of schools that have had issues with aggravated thermal bridging. That was a term that was coined by brands sort of back in maybe around 2010 about these issues that the ministry was having with basically poorly insulated roofs, mainly with big steel beams, really significant thermal bridging, a lot of moisture in the roof spaces, corrosion of beams, mould in those roof spaces, just quite a major problem really. But it all got lumped in with the whole leaky building thing.
Interesting. So it sounds like you've got quite a lot of experience in this whole leaky building thing with Prendos. Now, what do you see currently as the major challenges for the New Zealand construction industry looking at 2024 and going ahead?
I mean, I think, from an economic perspective, we've got high interest rates, really high construction rates, low sell prices. So we've got a market where a lot of projects are getting cancelled, deferred, people not wanting to build at the moment. So that's going to be a struggle this year. We're going to see, we already are seeing layoffs happening in companies, liquidations. So financially, it's going to be a struggle for businesses. But that always changes. There's always an upswing. So that's only ever temporary. Probably looking at the next 5 to 10 years, I think our biggest challenge is we have to meet the carbon challenge. So we have to fall out of love with building with steel and concrete and lots of glass. We've got to fall out of love with building big, fall out of love with new buildings. We've got to do adaptive reuse. We've got to build smart and efficient, and we've got to use low embodied carbon materials. And that's hard because we've got to change the whole way we do things as an industry.
Wow. So do you think, who do you think's really leading that charge at the moment? And how are we going to get there?
Yeah, it's hard to say that anyone's leading it. I mean, there's a lot of small, passionate organisations that are really pushing hard, but they're still seen as niche. And until the really big players get in there and start changing things, change isn't really going to happen in any big way.
Exactly.
Obviously we've got builders and developers. We've got some smaller ones that are really passionate about building really good housing, and they're out there doing it. But until we get our big group home builders doing it, that build 90% of houses in New Zealand, then we're not going to see much change on a big scale.
Exactly. Now, obviously, we've just recently seen the changes to H1 that have come into place. What are your thoughts about how far they've actually gone to change and what they might have missed out there?
Well, I think it's a good start, isn't it? It's better than nothing. And I think the really good thing about the H1 changes is we've drawn a line under non-thermally broken glazing. We're doing thermally broken glazing everywhere. Yes, a lot of the time it's still going to be aluminium, but still that's a massive step change across the industry that no one's not going to be building basically without thermally broken joinery anymore. So that makes a massive change. The other really good thing about the new H1 is the ability to use PHPP, the Passive House Planning Package, as a compliance solution. So that's really recognising that actually for building performance we need to use science and we should model it to get accurate results rather than applying sort of blanket rules. So that's a big step forward, and seeing people using more PHPP modelling, eco modelling, and actually zeroing in on the science of how thermal envelopes work. So that's, I guess, the good things. The not so good things, I guess there's all these other related parts to thermal performance, air tightness, good ventilation, dealing with internal moisture, thermal bridging that are not linked in with H1 or are not discussed at all in the building code. Those are the things that we need to make a really holistically high-performing, comfortable building. So that's, I guess, what hasn't happened, and it has been quite, I guess, widely criticised for that in the industry, but at the same time, at least we're seeing some change, and I think it's making people more aware of it as well, of thermal performance as an issue.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because I'm actually noticing that, as you say, there are some good things, there are some things that perhaps haven't been done, but certainly it seems to me that it has raised more awareness. Certainly when we go out and we speak to architects and builders, people are asking questions now. Yep. They've seen that there's a massive increase in the insulation, and mainly focused on the windows and the ceiling at this stage. And the good thing is that I think we're seeing that people are sort of asking questions about if they're following the scheduling method, how is it going to work out, and are at least considering going for a calculation method. Obviously, we'd prefer if things moved over to a modelling method, but at least the consideration of talking about insulation, and then the questions of the moisture within the internal elements of the building, and certainly I'm getting a lot of responses from people that they are thinking about more insulation. Well, what do we do about air tightness, or at least what is going to happen with the internal moisture?
Yeah, and I think the great thing about using energy modelling, and it's becoming a much less scary term to people these days, people aren't afraid of it, it doesn't seem like this really technical thing anymore, is that here in Auckland and in the other warmer climates around New Zealand, you can save your clients a lot of money by thermally modelling. When we look at roof insulation and everyone defaults to needing R6.6 construction R value as per the schedule method, well, if we're modelling most of our projects and finding that it's often more around R4.5 or R5 that you need, and if you put in more, you're probably going to be overheating. So not only if you model, you end up with a more comfortable house, but actually that's a significant saving in not only the insulation costs, but also the depth of your roof framing, which you're having to increase to fit all this insulation in. So that's really attractive, to developer clients and homeowners, that for the sake of spending a bit of money on some energy modelling, they're getting a better product and they're saving money.
And then, of course, it's all about the orientation of the building, isn't it, as well, and deciding where your bedrooms and where your living spaces and things are going to fit in around, because if you're not modelling, then if you're going schedule method, there's no real requirement, is there, to actually design the building to look at the sun control and things? Yeah,
I guess there's a nominal, reference to, east and west and north and south, but with PHPP, you're considering overshadowing of neighbouring properties, hills, forests, etc. And I think it's always in architecture to consider the site. If you're a good architect, you're thinking about where the views are, where the prevailing wind is from, where the sun is from, but there can be that knee-jerk reaction, the view's over there, so let's have a massive expanse of windows, but hang on a minute, it's south-facing, so is that really a good idea, or, can we manage that so we still get that view, but we're not losing all of our heat out that expanse of glass?
Exactly. Now, obviously, with improving performance of our buildings, we get the questions about cost. How do you think we can try and get people to balance these two things out so that we don't get this constant pushback? Well, we can't improve things because it's so expensive to build here in New Zealand.
I think it needs to happen before design starts, at that briefing stage. And if you're building a house or a building of any kind, really, you need to be very clear what your priorities are. So if we've got an option of building a 300 metre square code minimum house, or I can build a 180 metre squared, say, passive house, or kind of near passive house, or Homestar version 5 house, what's more important to me? Do I need that media room? do I need the guest bedroom that's used 5% of the year, or would I rather have a better house that I use every day for my family? So there needs to be prioritising of spaces, and we build far too big in general. We don't need to be building the size that we're building. And obviously at that concept stage, we all know from the passive house principles, we need to be considering our surface area to volume ratio, not overcomplicating our envelope, keeping it simple if we can, and that can still be really striking from an architectural point of view, and not overcomplicating the structure, not needing all this big heavy steel that's going to create thermal bridges we need to design out. So it's much easier to design a passive house right from the start and have it be cost effective, like we've seen with many of our own passive house designs, than it is to passive housify a standard design that you've done a concept for. So it's just planning, really.
Yeah, and how do you find clients are actually receiving that sort of message?
It's mixed. I think, to be honest, it's across the board with any client, whether they want to build a passive house or not, is that almost every client has bigger dreams than their budget will allow for. So every client generally needs to either make compromises or find some more money. So this is just another example of that. Other clients may need to compromise by not building the pool or making their house smaller, and it's just what you're compromising for. So that's always been part of design, that sort of tension between the dream and what you can actually afford.
So how would you recommend that a homeowner would actually go around and select a suitable architect for designing their home?
Well, if they want to build a certified passive house, they can go on the FINS Passive House Institute website, and there's some architects on there listed, a registry of qualified architects. If they have an architect in mind that they really like the design of and they're not certified, then I would recommend that architect should probably work really early on with a certified passive house designer that can be the passive house consultant on the project, because there's a lot of things you can do wrong without thinking about it if you don't know what you're doing. But there's a lot of good architects out there now that have the qualifications and the knowledge to do it, which is great. You're not, it's not a small group to choose from.
No, exactly. There's quite a large number on the Passive House website now. So talking about Passive House, when did you actually hear about the term or the concept of Passive House?
I would have heard about it at university back in the dark ages, but I probably didn't quite understand it. Like, I just thought it was some weird German thing, where you lived in a hermetically sealed box and didn't open the windows. Yeah. And I was probably a bit confused about passive house versus passive solar as well.
Yes, there is a lot of confusion about that, isn't there?
Yeah, and they're quite different. So I kind of had vaguely heard of it, but I really started looking into it in about 2018 when Joe Lyth from our practice and myself did the Part 1 consultants course actually here at Clima. So that was that was when I really started to understand it, and it's been a bit of a journey since then in terms of as a practice, the work we've been doing, and for myself being on the FINS board and actually getting more and more involved in the passive house community.
It's been really great to see the growth and the interest in passive house, hasn't it?
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. We had our FINS Hui late last year, and the amount of people that were interested, some were members of FINS and others were just really interested to find out about it. So, it's great to see that level of interest. Exactly.
And obviously tying in with your work with schools and things, do you think we'll be seeing a passive house school in New Zealand anytime soon?
That's the $1 million question. From what I understand, it's not on the Ministry of Education's radar at any time in the future. It's not something they've been convinced of the value of, rightly or wrongly at the moment. But overseas, the trend that we've seen is a lot of private schools, Catholic schools and other private schools looking towards passive house. And I know there have been a couple of schools in New Zealand that haven't got there yet, but have definitely investigated going down that path. So I would like to hope that we get a school of some kind, whether it's a kindergarten or a private school rather than a Ministry of Education school down the Passive House route. Because certainly what we've seen in Scotland and other parts of the UK is that, for education, it's perfect.
Exactly. I mean, there's such value in it, specifically sort of at the beginning of life at schools, but also probably at retirement villages, wouldn't it be?
Oh, absolutely. And I would like to see whether any of the villages go down that route. I know a lot of them are considering Homestar at the moment and Green Star for some of their public facilities. So sustainability and energy efficiency and thermal comfort is definitely on the radar of these organisations. So, let's see where it goes.
Exactly. Awesome, Natasha. Thank you so much for your time today. Is there anything else that I've left out that you would have liked to mention today?
I don't think so, no.
No? Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Great to talk to you, Simon.
You too. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye then. Sharing knowledge is at the heart of our strategy to make buildings better for everyone. Sign up for our podcast to learn more about creating healthy living conditions by protecting structures from external and internal moisture damage. Thanks for listening. Looking forward to having you with us next time.